In today's video, we take a little road trip to a spectacular part of Washington State, a couple of hours north of where I live in the Tri-Cities. We visit the site of what was once the largest waterfall in the world, but that was about 15,000 years ago, and this is all that remains of it. This is what's known as Washington's Dry Falls, and I'll tell you all about it in this new travel video. This is Missoula, Montana, and that's the Clark Fork River running right through it. And about 15,000 years ago, during the last ice age, most of Canada was covered by glaciers, and one of those glaciers reached all the way down as far south as Idaho and blocked the Clark Fork River. And that was basically like Mother Nature building a dam on the river, and over time it created a gigantic lake which covered the Missoula Valley with water about 600 feet deep. Up in the hills above Missoula, which 15,000 years ago was the shoreline of glacial Lake Missoula, you can actually see horizontal lines along the hillside, kind of like rings on the side of a bathtub, marking how high the water level was at different points in history. Eventually, there was so much water behind that glacial ice dam that the pressure was too much, and the dam burst, releasing all that water at once in a gigantic flood, which raced across the state of Washington until it finally drained out to the Pacific Ocean. And this didn't happen just once. It actually happened about a dozen different times, or maybe more, during the last ice age. These repeated floods across the state of Washington shaped the landscape in amazing ways that we can still see today. So recently, my wife and I took a road trip to see the evidence of those ice age floods. And as we drove north, the first signs of the ice age floods were here at a spot known as the Ephrata Erratic. Ask yourself how these large boulders ended up in this field. Well, as the floodwaters gushed over the landscape north of here, it ripped out large boulders from the basalt rock formations. And when the floodwaters reached this spot, the waters had slowed down enough that the rocks were pushed no further. And they're still here today, about 15,000 years later. This is one of the largest boulders that was deposited here. It's known as Monster Rock. As we drove further north, we reached Lenoir Lake, which was formed by the Ice Age floods. And some of those rocks we saw at the Ephrata Erratic probably came from the basalt hillsides in this area. What you're looking at here is known as a coulee, a large, steep-walled, trench-like trough formed by erosion as water passed over basalt. And by the way, basalt is just rock that was formed by rapid cooling of a lava flow millions of years ago. This was an especially interesting sight from my drone. This ridge is all that's left after the floods tore through this area. The water reached almost all the way up to the top, and only the very top of the ridge was above the water, which flowed past that ridge on both sides as it came through this area. Now, just a little further up the road, we pulled into the parking lot of the viewing area at Dry Falls State Park, where there's an overlook that provides an amazing view of the site of what once was the largest waterfall in the world. When that glacial ice dam in Idaho broke apart, the entire contents of glacial Lake Missoula rapidly drained in only about 2 days, and when that huge amount of water came through here, it was hundreds of feet deep as it reached this spot and dropped over the side of this coulee. Think for a minute about what that must have been like. And keep in mind that during the Ice Age, this didn't happen just once. It happened something like a dozen times, maybe more. Glaciers blocked the Clark Fork River, formed ice dams, filled up the lake. The ice dam eventually gave way, and a tremendous flood swept across this part of Washington and eventually all the way down to the Pacific Ocean. Not far from where I live in the Tri-Cities, there's another really interesting rock formation that was created by those Ice Age floods. This formation is known as the Twin Sisters. As the Ice Age floods roared through this area, it eroded much of the basalt rock, leaving just these two pillars of basalt at this spot just south of the Tri-Cities near the Wallula Gap along the Columbia River Basin. And one other interesting bit of evidence of the Ice Age floods is Palouse Falls, where the Palouse River drops about 200 feet over this basalt hillside. Just downstream, there's an extraordinary canyon that has been formed by the water flow. I think of it as Washington's version of the Grand Canyon. And from there, the muddy water of the Palouse River makes its way south and flows into the much cleaner blue water of the Snake River, not far from the site of this amazing train trestle over the Snake River. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this little tour of Central Washington today. Lots of amazing scenery that was shaped about 15,000 years ago at the end of the last Ice Age, when repeated floods occurred after glacial ice dams gave way, draining huge lakes that formed after glaciers repeatedly blocked the Clark Fork River in Montana. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button to let YouTube know that it's a good video that they should recommend to other people. I'm Jim Zim. Thanks for watching.